In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast, it is Mailbag Monday. I'm bringing it back. It's been a little while since I've answered questions, and these questions have come from my timeline on Twitter or my inbox. I know it's not called Twitter anymore. It's called X, but it will forever be known as Twitter to me. Just like the Staples Center will always be the Staples Center. I will not call it Crypto.com Arena. But anyway, I'm answering your questions. This episode will be broken up into two parts. So this is part one of Mailbag Monday. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board. I am flying solo today. I haven't done a solo episode in a little while, but I am solo today. James will be on the podcast tomorrow, and then Richard Stamen, and then Leaf. And I will be headed to Indianapolis at the end of the week for the All-Star game and the dunk contest, but I'm really mostly there for Basketball Without Borders. I went last year and I was able to watch T-John Salon, Nikola Topic, and Cherry Darlan that plays for the G League Ignite. So I will be at Basketball Without Borders this weekend, looking to get an early start on some prospects that I believe will be highly regarded in the 2025 NBA draft. But before we get started in this episode, I want to let you know that it is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to, but faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnba, and you can post your job for free. And of course, terms and conditions apply. All right, let's just get right into it. I have 20 questions. I had to narrow it down to 20. I'll probably get about 2 or 3 questions per day. Sometimes, like I said, it's on the YouTube comments. It's in my inbox, people running into me at different Mavs games. And so I have a lot of questions, but I decided to narrow it down to 20. And the first question is a question that I've heard from several people, just whether it's fans, agents, people that work in the league office, and that may not all be worded exactly like this, but the question I got is this the weakest draft of the 21st century? I still think it's too early to tell. You just never know how a class ends up. I mean, yes, there are classes that coming into the season are more hyped, or they may have more star power, but you just never know. I remember in 2020, people said it wasn't a strong class, and that class produced Anthony Edwards. I mean, it ended up being a pretty strong class, so it's too early to tell. I do think that there are a lot of question marks and concerns in this draft. I do believe that there are some teams that would probably rather pick 5 through 10 than 1 through 5 because there's not much of a gap between 1 through 5. Now, for me, and I'll probably touch on it later, Alex Sarr is clearly my number one. I have him in a tier by himself, but I still have some questions and concerns about him. So, like I said, it's too early to say it's the weakest draft of the 21st century, but it definitely lacks the star power of last year, for example, with Victor Wembanyama. You can say it's unlikely it's going to be like 2018 where you had Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, just to name a few. But right now, it seems like it is a weak draft. I know a lot of people are looking forward to the 2025 draft. I've heard a different agency. It may not be the thoughts or the reflection of the entire agency, but I did hear someone from a sports agency, a major agency, say that they're kind of punting on this class and that they're focusing their efforts on 2025. So right now, the consensus is it's not a strong class, but it's too early to decide or determine if it's the weakest class of the 21st century. All right, the next question. Rafael, did you hear Carmelo's recent comments about the one-and-done kids not being physically ready for the league? Yes, I did. Carmelo Anthony has a podcast. I believe it's called like 7 p.m. in Brooklyn. It is very good. I mean, I haven't watched all the episodes, but there's so much content coming out, so many good podcasts with players coming out. But Carmelo's is one that I like, and I actually saw the one where they asked him about his son, Kyan, and he said that he would beat Carmelo, or he was better than him, or he said he would fry him at the same age. I thought that was hilarious. But Melo is really good at the podcasting space, and I can't play the clip just for copyright reasons, but I love everything he said, especially in comparison to his son and Bronny. He's not putting any pressure on his son. He made the comment that the goal is for him to be ready, whether it takes 1, 2, or 3. He's getting him focused on college. He's not, talking about the league or just kind of putting any pressure on him. And I think that's the right approach. And I do think a lot of the one and dones just aren't physically ready for the NBA, but the NBA is a lot more patient than Europe, for example. So if you're not physically ready in the NBA, it's like you get time, but at the same time, you get a short amount of time because the next class is coming and they replace draft picks consistently. So I do 100% agree with what he's saying. I mean, obviously there's some exceptions. A guy like Jalen Duren is physically ready, but I do believe that most of the guys in any draft class are not ready to really, really contribute, especially on a winning team. They can put up numbers and they can contribute and they can play, but they're not ready to contribute on a team that is winning. I mean, of course there are some exceptions, but I do agree with Carmelo's take as a whole. I know I probably shouldn't be promoting another podcast on another platform, but check out 7 p.m. in Brooklyn. I believe that's what it's called, Carmelo's podcast. It is good stuff. All right, number 3. This is, I guess, related to the last episode that we dropped that came out on Saturday. But the question is, I watched Cody Williams against Arizona this weekend, and if he's the top college player, then this draft is weaker than I thought. Please tell me that was just a bad game. So on Saturday, we released the episode Leaf to Lean, talked about Cody Williams. He mentioned that Cody Williams is in his top 3 and that he believed that he was the best or the first player from the NCAA ranks that will be selected in the 2024 draft. And yeah, Cody Williams, his last 3 games haven't been great. And you can say that's a reflection of this class. But against Arizona, he only took 7 shots in 33 minutes, had 8 points. Follow that up, or the game before against Arizona State, he had 11 points. And the game prior to that against Washington State, he had 6 points. So you're talking about a guy that people are saying could be the first player selected from the NCAA ranks that has 6 points, 11 points, and 8 points in his last 3 games. Not necessarily dominating numbers and numbers that are going to stand out. He's had 3 assists total in those 3 games. He's had 4 blocks, but he's had 7 turnovers. So he's had more turnovers than assists. So I get it. I really get it. But he's had some games against like Colorado State, Pepperdine, California, where he had 21, and 16. Again, this draft is wide open. I can see from the perspective of someone that just tuned in on a game and watched Cody Williams play, how you could say, hey, if this guy's the best college prospect, then I got some real questions about this draft. But it was an off game. But again, I get your point. I totally get your point. But on the flip side, Cody Williams is 6'8". He is a good athlete, shows some flashes as a playmaker. So there is a lot of intrigue about him, but I think it's more so of a long-term prospect or project than someone that's able to contribute right away. But yes, Cody Williams did not look like a potential top 5 pick against Arizona. All right. When we return, I'll finish answering questions. But let's talk about LinkedIn. Because when you are hiring for a small business, you are looking for quality professionals that are the right fit for that role. Similar to sports, it's all about fit. You're looking for the right pieces to make your team better or to help your team reach the bottom line. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because at LinkedIn Jobs, they have the tools that will help you find the right professionals for your team and faster. So LinkedIn is not just another job board. It has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals. That is crazy. A billion professionals. We don't even have a billion people in the United States, but they have over a billion professionals, which makes it the best place to look for people to hire. It gives you access to the professionals that you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process very simple, easy, and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy that, in fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and they may not have the time or the resources to hire. So LinkedIn is consistently finding ways to make the process a lot easier. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Locked On has launched the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and you can now also find it on Amazon Fire TV. The crew at Locked On are making big moves, and Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts, plus our national shows that cover every league. So find the Locked On Sports Today channel on Amazon Fire TV. Question number 5. What is your draft range from North Carolina's Harrison Ingram? I absolutely love his game. So Harrison Ingram was a McDonald's All-American. He was highly touted coming out of high school here in the Dallas area, went to Stanford. And at Stanford, he was on some teams that weren't really talented, and he had to carry a heavy load. I talked to some scouts last year about him, and it was more so along the lines of, should he transfer or should he stay? And the consensus was he's a guy that can really help a good team, but he's not the type of player that can propel a bad team and make them good. And he's having a really good year so far for North Carolina. The biggest jump has been his outside shooting. He's improved as a shooter. He's not really shooting free throws at an efficient rate. So that is somewhat of a concern as I'm pulling up the numbers right here. But Harrison Ingram so far is averaging 12.5 points, 8.7 rebounds, 2.3 assists. He's shooting 44% from the floor, but 42% from three. But here's the catch to it. He's shooting 42% from three, but 55% from the foul line. He shot 66% from the foul line as a freshman, 59% as a sophomore, and the three-point shooting is down to a career low, but the free throw shooting is down, but the three-point shooting is up significantly. So it's going to be interesting to see what is the real true indicator of his shooting touch. He's always been a good rebounder. His assist numbers are down this year because he's with more talented teammates and the playmaking role is a little bit reduced. But I think he's done an excellent job of fitting in and showing why he was so highly touted coming out of high school. He drew a lot of comparisons to Draymond Green. It's just unfair. I mean, I get it as far as like being a guy that can be a hub at 6'7", 6'8", strong frame, a natural playmaker in a sense. I don't know if he has the defensive, well, I shouldn't say I don't know. I mean, who does have Draymond's defensive instincts and impact? So I think that part is kind of unfair, but I think Harrison Ingram has helped himself this year. I think he's in the range of being a top 40 pick, but this draft is wide open. He can have a strong rest of the ACC season, ACC tournament, and NCAA tournament, knock down shots and make plays, and he could easily be in the discussion for a first-round pick. So I think his range is wide, and I think he's one of like 40 or 50 players that believes they could end up being a first-round pick in this draft. As crazy as it may sound, but there are quite a few guys that think they can be first-round picks, and their agents are telling them that, their friends and family, and it's not unrealistic because this draft is so wide open. Who is your number one and why? My number one pick is Alex Sarr, and I mentioned in the open, I have Sarr in a tier by himself. He was a player that I had a lot of questions about coming into the season. I've never doubted his talent. I just didn't always think that the production matched the talent. even at the under 18s, or maybe it was under 19s this summer. I get him confused. He only averaged 7 points per game, but he was always a player, and I've mentioned this over and over and over if you're an everyday or you've heard the story before. But he's always a player that when I watched him on film, I was just wowed by how well he moves, the length, the athleticism, and the upside. And he's finally putting it together after like a dominant performance of 2-game performance at the G League Showcase in October. I put him as my number one. He's been there since. I think it's going to be hard for anyone to surpass him. His play in Australia has been good, not great. He's had some games where he looks like the surefire number one pick, and then he's had some games where the talent showed, but the production wasn't there. I think if he puts it all together, he has the highest upside. My concern is that he's just cool, man. Sometimes he's cool. He's laid back. The fire that he showed against the Ignite in October hasn't been consistent. I think if he played with that type of consistency as far as fire and wanting to dominate, I think he could be really, really special. The shooting is, I mean, it's all about upside right now. If you look at the shooting numbers, he's not an efficient shooter. It's just all about upside for me and the flashes that he's shown. I think he is going to be able to contribute on the defensive end right away just because, I mean, like I say, he covers so much ground. 7'1", long wingspan, athletic. He had a play that has stood out to me, and I'll forever remember it, but it was a play against Ron Holland in that showcase. And Ron is extremely fast. Ron is, possibly a top 10 pick or higher. And Sarge just sat in his chair and was able to match him stride for stride, lock him up, blocking shots. So I think he is the number one pick. Again, he's in a tier by himself for me right now. But I think if he puts it all together, the shooting, the ball handling, the ability to attack closeouts, the defense, but if he can just add a little bit more competitive fire, then I think it probably won't even be close. So Alex Sarr is my number one as of today, which is February 12th, 2024. All right, the next question is, who are the prospects, or who is a prospect that you are high on coming into this season but is falling down your draft board? So I have two that come to mind. First is Justin Edwards. I had Justin Edwards as my top player coming into this season. And now I think that it's very realistic that Justin Edwards could fall out of the first round. Like, when is the last time has that happened? Skal Labissiere? I don't know, but I mean, I guess they got something in common. They both went to Kentucky. But yeah, Edwards just hasn't looked the part of a number one pick. He hasn't shown the mentality, the aggressive mentality as a guy that's a number one pick. I mean, when you look at his numbers, 8 points, 3.6 rebounds. He's averaging less than an assist per game, shooting 44% from the floor, 29% from three. He's only getting to the foul line 1.5 times per game. You just have to wonder, like, did he make a mistake by going to Kentucky? Should he have went to a Power 5 school that doesn't have so much talent around him, where he would probably be forced a little bit to take more so of a, I don't want to say dominant role, but more so of an alpha role, because he seems very, very, very comfortable blending in, and that's probably going to be his role in the NBA anyway. But he had some games, like he had a game against South Carolina where he played 23 minutes and took one shot in 23 minutes. He had a game against Kansas where he was 0 for 6 from the floor. I mean, he's had some really, really bad games. He's had some bad games. He did have a good game against Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt is definitely not a powerhouse. But that was a game where you at least saw flashes of what made people so high on him. He had 17 points that game, got to the foul line 6 times, was 5 of 10 from the floor. But other than that, man, I mean, the flashes have been few and far between. So he's definitely sliding. I don't think he should come back to school. I mean, it also could be similar to Chris Livingston, who was highly touted coming into the year. And I think Livingston ended up being like the last pick. I know he was one of the last picks of the second round. So, yeah, man, Justin Edwards is a guy that I was really, really high on, and he is sliding. And then there's JaKobe Walter, who got off to a sensational start to the season, had 28 points against Auburn. And I thought, like, okay, this guy could be one of the safest picks in the draft because he has the positional size and he is a lights out shooter. But in conference play, you ready for these numbers? The 12 points is fine. He's shooting 31% from the floor, 40% on twos, and 23% from three. Now he's getting to the foul line 5 attempts per game, which is pretty incredible that he's able to draw fouls at such a high rate when he's not really much of a shot creator, which is very, very interesting. But I can talk about that on another show. But the numbers in conference play, and the Big 12 is a tough conference, arguably the toughest conference by far. But I've really been underwhelmed or disappointed with his play. 31, 23, 84 shooting splits. So his stock is kind of sliding for me also. But you could say he's in a similar situation without the injury as Keontae George. Keontae's Big 12 numbers and his efficiency weren't great, but he's been, he's been better than I think what people expected from him as a rookie. But JaKobe Walter is a guy that is sliding for me as of right now. But there's still enough time to get back into my top 10. All right, when we return, I'll round out the questions. So I'm going to answer 10 questions in this episode. I will round out and finish out the episode, but stay tuned because there is a part 2 where I have questions 11 through 20 of the questions that I cherry picked for this Mailbag Monday episode. All right, before we get into the next set of questions, I want to ask you, the listener, are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Do you ever wonder what adventure could be around the corner? Well, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. My favorite one is the Nissan Pathfinder. It has room up to 8. It has an expansive cargo capacity and advanced available 4x4 capability. It has 284 horsepower and it can tow up to 6,000 pounds. So when adventure calls, the Nissan Pathfinder is there to answer. So take the Nissan Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop at nissanusa.com. All right, I got 2 more questions before we wrap up this episode. Be sure to tune in for part 2. Question number 9. Pelle Larson and Caleb Love, they are the 2 backcourt mates at the University of Arizona. And the question is, Pelle Larson and Caleb Love, are they NBA players? So if you don't know, Larson and Love form Arizona's backcourt, arguably the best backcourt in college basketball. And if I had to choose between the 2, I would go with Pelle Larson. I love the size at 6'6". He can shoot. He's shooting 42% from 3, shooting 54% from the floor. He's averaging 4 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists, a steal per game. Just does a little bit of everything. Nothing spectacular. I would like to see him shoot with more volume, even though he is shooting 42% from the floor and averaging 13 points per game. He's only shooting 2.5 threes. Like, he's never had a season where he shot more than 2.5 threes per game. A weird stat is, as a sophomore, junior, and senior, he's averaged exactly 2.5 three-point attempts per game. This year is the first year at Arizona that he's over 40% from 3. I just think that there is a role for him in the NBA as a rotation wing that can knock down open shots. He's a good athlete, not great, but he's a good athlete, can finish on 3 levels on the college level, space the floor, just does a little bit of everything from the rebounding and passing. So I really like Pelle Larson. He's another player that is in this wide range to the point where I think if he has a really strong NCAA tournament and Arizona goes far with his shooting and his size, and I mean, he's ready to come in and play right away in a sense, I would not be surprised if he gets some late first round looks, but then he could also be someone that goes undrafted because this draft is extremely crazy. While it's not heavy up top with like franchise changing talent, I believe that there are it might be like 70 to 75 guys in this class. This is a crazy statement I'm about to say. 70 to 75 guys in this class that I think at some point or another will see NBA minutes in their career. So, of course, there's only going to be 58 guys that get drafted because we're minus 2 picks. But I do think that you're going to see guys play in the G League and get 10-day contracts. So this is a very, very weird class. I mean, just in the 2023 class, there are 2 guys that didn't average 10 points per game in college, but saw NBA minutes in Dexter Dennis and Trey Jemison, who signed a 2-way with the Memphis Grizzlies. So I do think that Pelle Larson is someone that is going to see NBA minutes soon. I just don't know his draft range. I think it could be anywhere from 25 to 55 or after that. But I really like what he does, what he brings to the table. And then Caleb Love. Caleb Love is a little bit more difficult to, I guess, understand his draft range. Everyone knows Caleb Love is a bucket. Caleb Love can score, one of the best scorers in college basketball. He is playing his best basketball of his career. He's averaging a little under 19 points per game, 5 rebounds, 3.3 assists, has good size at 6'4". Is he a point guard? No. Does he shoot it well enough to be a 2? I don't know. I mean, he's just a bucket getter. He's one of the guys that is known as a scorer, and sometimes I think it's better to be known as a shooter or a 3-and-D guy or a defender than a guy that is just a flat-out scorer. Because, I mean, if you've been paying attention to the NBA, they don't have any issues scoring the ball, but they're looking more so for guys that can play a role as a complementary player to the stars, to the guys that are making 40 and 45 million. So with all that being said, so Love is a guy that I think would be best suited as like a microwave bench scorer off the bench. The question is, like, can he be efficient? This year he's shooting 43% from the floor and 35% from 3, which is a career high, which for a guy that's in his 4th year, you would think that he'd still be a little bit more efficient. But coming from the past 3 years, like he had 3 years at North Carolina where he shot below 40%. Shot 37.8% as a junior, 37% as a sophomore, 31% as a freshman. But he's always been able to score. One thing he does not lack is confidence. He is a confident shot taker, tough shot maker. He can definitely win you some games with his shooting, and he can shoot you out of games. So he's more so of an acquired taste. My prediction is he ends up on a 2-way. He lights up the G League. I mean, absolutely lights up the G League in scoring next year. I mean, he could return to school. I mean, he was in, I guess he could, have a 5th year and try to do the Kevin McCullough route. We'll see if he crosses that path, but I can just see him as a guy that ends up on a 2-way, lights up the G League in scoring, and then is going to have to decide what's next because NBA teams may not be interested in him as a big-time scorer. And you don't always see guys that put up huge numbers in the G League as far as scoring get call-ups. So, I mean, he can score with the best of them. Will he get a cup of tea in the NBA? I think so. But it's all going to boil down to his efficiency. And even though, like I said, the efficiency numbers have improved, still for a guy that's in his 4th year, 43, 35 shooting splits from the field and 3 aren't great. All right, and the very last question is Tyrese Proctor the next Tyrese Haliburton? Do you see similarities? That's a pretty interesting question. If Tyrese Proctor is Tyrese Haliburton, that is a major win for whoever selects him. One of my knocks on Tyrese Haliburton coming out of Iowa State was he didn't get to the foul line enough. I thought Tyrese Haliburton was going to be a really, really, really good complementary player, but I did not see him being an engine to one of the most high-powered offenses in NBA history. So I was definitely wrong about Tyrese Haliburton. But I was very high on Tyrese Proctor coming into the season. One of the knocks I have on Tyrese Proctor is, even though he is a guy that shows really nice flashes as a shot maker and shot creator. I don't think he gets to the line enough. I don't think he gets downhill. And I'm a guy that really, really likes players that get downhill and attack the basket. And so with Tyrese Proctor, that is one of my concerns. Are there similarities? I don't know. I mean, I think physically there may be some similarities. They're bigger point guards that can, make the right reads. I will say this much, that I do think that Tyrese Proctor has shown more flashes as a shot maker and more offensive creativity than what Haliburton showed when Haliburton was at Iowa State. But Tyrese Proctor this year, I guess the shooting numbers have increased. He's at 37% from three, 76% from the foul line. Only gets to the foul line 2 times per game. That is kind of like my knock. Duke is a team that is, loaded. They're loaded with talent. They have, between Foster and Filipowski and Mitchell, they have NBA. And I didn't even talk about McCain. They have NBA level talent on the team for sure, and he's playing a good role. Half of his attempts, a little more than half of his attempts from the floor are from three, but I just haven't been crazy impressed with Tyrese Proctor this year. Again, coming in to the season, I had him as a top 10 pick, but I just haven't been as impressed. But he's played well of late, especially as we've gotten into conference play. I know it's a long-winded answer. Do I think he can be the next Tyrese Haliburton? No, but I didn't think Tyrese Haliburton was going to be the Tyrese Haliburton that we see today. But I do see somewhat of the similarities, but I think they're mostly physical as far as being big point guards and playmakers, and the shooting is similar. But, that would be great. If Proctor ends up being the next Haliburton, that would be an absolute win. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Stay tuned because there is a part 2 of Mailbag Monday where I will answer 10 more questions. Once again, it's Rafael, and I am out.